Hi guys, welcome back to Prospect Channel TV. Thank you for always stopping by. If you're just joining us for the first time, please kindly subscribe to this channel and don't forget to give us a thumbs up, abeg. Waiting you are about to watch could shock you. What is actually going on in Finland? The Finland government versus Simon Ekpa and Nigerian government. Okay guys, let's go there. I will be right back. Thank you.
Imagine sitting in a foreign courtroom, your freedom hanging by a thread, while an entire nation's hope rests on your shoulders. That was the reality on September 28, 2025, when Simon Ekpa, one of the most controversial and talked about figures in Africa, faced a legal storm in Finland. But what happened inside that courtroom was not just another routine case. It was explosive, emotional, and historic. His lawyer, Kaarle Gummerus, dropped a bombshell that could completely change the direction of this trial. The Nigerian government, desperate to paint Simon as a criminal, claimed they had arrested a man known as Commander Gentle and tied him directly to Simon. But here's the shocking twist. There is no picture, no video, no proof that this so-called commander was ever arrested. Nothing. Just words. And Gummerus stood up and tore that narrative apart, calling out the Nigerian state for fabricating evidence, for using torture, and for trying to criminalize humanitarian support as terrorism. This is bigger than just one man's trial. It is about history, about justice, and about a people who have been silenced for more than 50 years. To understand why this moment sent shockwaves across Biafran communities from Enugu to London, from Aba to Houston, you need to remember the past. The starvation of millions during the Civil War, the persecution of voices like Nnamdi Kanu, and the constant cycle of arrests and killings in southeastern Nigeria. And then came the most emotional moment of all. Simon, weary from months behind bars, looked his lawyer in the eye and asked a simple but heartbreaking question. Do you really believe in my innocence? What happened next silenced the room. Gummerus told him he wasn't just a client, he was a liberation fighter. He even admitted he would defend Simon without pay if it came to that, because the cause itself mattered. For Simon, it was a rare moment of hope in the darkness. For millions of Biafrans, it was validation. This is not just a courtroom drama, it's a global turning point. If Simon wins, it could shatter Nigeria's narrative and give legitimacy to the Biafran struggle. If he loses, the persecution will only deepen. So the question is, will Finland's courtroom deliver justice, or will history repeat itself? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear next might change the way you see this entire struggle forever. On September 28, 2025, Simon Ekpa's lawyer, identified as Kaarle Gummerus, revealed new explosive evidence to defend Simon Ekpa in his appeal case in Finland. Central to the case is the arrest of Commander Gentle by Nigerian security forces, which the prosecution wants to use as evidence against Simon Ekpa. Kaarle Gummerus argued that the Nigerian government has not proven they actually arrested Gentle, since no face or proof of identity has been publicly shown, making their evidence unreliable. Even if Gentle was arrested, Kaarle Gummerus stressed that any confession obtained in Nigerian custody is questionable due to human rights abuses and torture, referencing similar treatment of Nnamdi Kanu by the DSS. Simon Ekpa admitted sending money to Gentle but clarified it was for humanitarian support in southeastern Nigeria, not for arms purchase, and there are no records linking him to weapons transactions. Kaarle Gummerus positioned Simon Ekpa as a human rights activist, legally entitled to interact with various groups in pursuit of advocacy. which should not criminalize him. The prosecution linked Simon Ekpa to the Biafran Liberation Army, BLA, but Carla Gumerus dismissed it, saying it was not an official army, but just a loosely organized group anyone could label. During their discussion, Simon Ekpa asked his lawyer Carl Gumerus if he truly believed in his innocence. Carl Gumerus responded that he saw Simon Ekpa as someone fighting for liberation, not just as a client. Simon Ekpa questioned whether his lawyer was only after money. Calgary assured him he cared about his professional success rate and even offered to support Simon Ekpa for free at some stages, making Simon Ekpa emotional and grateful. Carla Gumerus advised Simon Ekpa to remain calm, respectful, and let him handle the legal battle as more sensitive evidence would be presented in court soon. On the 28th of September 2025 in Finland, a story unfolded that carried the weight of history, the sharpness of injustice, and the stubborn flame of hope for millions of Biafrans around the world. Simon Ekpa, a man who has become both a target of state persecution and a symbol of resistance, sat with his lawyer Carla Gumerus to chart a strategy that could determine not just his own freedom, but also the legitimacy of the Biafran struggle in the eyes of the world. The problems at the heart of this case are not only legal, they are political, historical, emotional, and deeply tied to the centuries-old oppression of the Igbo people in Nigeria. To understand why this moment in Finland sparked jubilation across the Biafran global community, we need to look carefully at the layers of injustice that have defined this struggle. The first problem is the weaponization of the Nigerian state against Biafran voices. From the brutal suppression of the Biafran War between 1967 and 1970, where over 3 million Igbo men, women and children starved and perished under a deliberate blockade, to the modern-day harassment, torture and killings of young men in the southeast by the Nigerian military, there has been a continuous pattern of marginalization. The same playbook is being used today. The Nigerian government attempts to silence dissent not by addressing grievances, but by criminalizing those who raise their voices. Simon Ekpa's arrest and trial in Finland are deeply tied to this history. Nigerian authorities have been desperate to link him with violence, armed groups and instability. The arrest of Commander Gentle, a name suddenly floated by Nigerian security forces, was immediately weaponized against Simon. Yet, as Carla Gumerus pointed out, the so-called arrest is filled with contradictions. No picture, no video, no verifiable evidence of identity was ever released. The Nigerian state merely issued a claim, expecting the international community to swallow it without question. This echoes a long history where the Nigerian government fabricates, manipulates, and distorts information to justify violence against the Igbo. The second problem is the systematic violation of human rights. Even if Commander Gentle had been arrested, can any confession extracted under the custody of the Department of State Services, DSS, in Nigeria be trusted? The world has already seen the treatment of Nnamdi Kanu, who was abducted through extraordinary rendition from Kenya in 2021 and subjected to degrading, inhumane treatment in solitary confinement for years. Reports from Amnesty International and human rights defenders have consistently shown that torture, forced confessions, and abuse are standard tactics of Nigerian security services. What then is the value of any evidence born out of such torture chambers? This was exactly the point Gumerus drove home. The third problem is the deliberate attempt to erase the distinction between humanitarian support and criminal activity. Simon Ekpa admitted that he sent money to people in the southeast, including Commander Gentle. But here is the truth. That money was not for weapons. It was for survival. Anyone who knows the situation in Igbo land understands the economic siege, the roadblocks, the military checkpoints where extortion is daily bread, and the abandoned youths who live without hope. For Simon, sending money was an act of solidarity, of brotherhood, and of compassion. Yet Nigerian prosecutors want to twist that into terrorism. This is where the historical wound cuts deepest. The Nigerian state has always punished the Igbo for organizing, for supporting one another, for daring to dream of dignity. During the Civil War, when the blockade caused starvation, international humanitarian aid flights were bombed. Children died with swollen stomachs because relief was denied. Today, when Biafrans abroad send money to their homeland, the state labels it as terrorism. It is the same cruel logic dressed in modern language. Carlo Gumarus, with his calm reasoning, dismantled this false narrative. He told the court that Simon was not a warlord, but a human rights activist. He reminded them that international law protects the right to advocate, to communicate, and to support communities in distress. To criminalize such actions is to criminalize humanity itself. The Nigerian government tried to link Simon to the so-called Biafran Liberation Army, but as Gumarus cleverly explained, this army is not an organized force. It is a loose phrase, sometimes used by the media, sometimes by security agents, sometimes even by criminals who want to mislead people. Anyone can label themselves as BLA, but that does not make it a structured organization. To pin Simon to it is dishonest. It is an attempt to create guilt by association. At the emotional core of this story was the private exchange between Simon and Carla. Simon, weighed down by months of incarceration and endless propaganda against him, asked his lawyer if he truly believed in his innocence. This was not the question of a guilty man. It was the cry of someone fighting a battle larger than himself. Carl's answer was moving. He said he saw Simon not just as a client, but as a liberation fighter. He admitted that his motivation went beyond money, even offering to stand by Simon without charge at certain points because the cause itself mattered to him. This moment broke Simon's heart. For once, he felt not just like a prisoner in a foreign land, but like a human being whose struggle was recognized. It gave him renewed energy to continue, and it gave Biafrans across the world reason to celebrate. In Finland, supporters danced and waved Biafran flags. In London, in Houston, in Johannesburg, people raised their voices on social media, declaring that this was the turning point. The consequences of this case are far-reaching. If the appeal succeeds, it will not only free Simon Ekpa, but also dismantle the narrative Nigeria has built against the Biafran movement. It will show that the world cannot simply accept every lie from Abuja as truth. It will open doors for further legal and diplomatic recognition of the plight of Biafrans. But if the case goes the other way, the consequences will be dangerous. It would embolden the Nigerian state to continue its persecution. It would mean more arbitrary arrests, more torture, more killings in the southeast. It would also set a precedent where diaspora activists could be criminalized for speaking truth to power. So the question is, are there solutions? Yes, there are. The first is legal. With a strong lawyer like Carlo Gumarus, the chances of victory in court are very high. The second is diplomatic. Already, Biafran groups are engaging with the European Union, the United Nations, and human rights organizations to expose Nigeria's abuses. The third is moral and inspirational. Biafrans themselves must not give up. They must continue to speak, to write, to protest, and to support one another. Freedom is never given. It is taken by the determined. To every Biafran reading this story, the message is clear. You are not forgotten. The same way the Jews came out of the Holocaust with dignity, the same way South Africans came out of apartheid with victory, so too will the Igbo people and the Biafra nation rise. You may be beaten today, but you are not broken. You may be silenced in Nigerian newspapers, but your voice echoes in the world. Your children will not grow up in fear forever. Simon Ekpa's battle in Finland is your battle. His courage is your courage. His tears are your tears. And when victory comes, it will belong to all Biafrans. The story of Simon Ekpa's legal battle in Finland cannot be told in isolation. To fully understand why the courtroom exchange between Simon and Carla Gumarus ignited such jubilation, we must return to the origins of the Biafran struggle. This is because what is playing out in 2025 in a European courtroom is not simply about one man. It is about a people who have lived under oppression, exclusion, and calculated violence for more than half a century. When the Nigerian Civil War broke out in 1967, it was not because the Igbo people woke up one morning and decided to secede. It was because of a long chain of massacres, betrayals, and systemic persecution. The pogroms of 1966 saw tens of thousands of Igbo men, women, and children slaughtered in northern Nigeria simply because of their ethnicity. Trains filled with corpses returned to the east. Mothers wept over mutilated sons. Fathers dug graves for entire families. It was a nightmare so deep that the declaration of Biafra was seen as the only way to preserve existence. Yet instead of negotiation, the Nigerian state responded with war. Between 1967 and 1970, Nigeria unleashed a blockade, cutting off food, medicine, and supplies to the east. Starvation became a weapon of mass destruction. Children's stomachs swelled from kwashiorkor. Mothers watched helplessly as their babies died in their arms. Over 3 million Biafrans perished in those 3 years. This was not just a war, it was genocide. The Nigerian government, backed by Britain and other foreign allies, carried out the atrocities with cold calculation. Even Red Cross planes carrying food aid were targeted. Relief centers were bombed. Villages were razed. And when the war ended in 1970, instead of reconciliation, there was humiliation. The so-called "no victor, no vanquished" slogan was nothing more than political deception. Biafrans were reduced to £20 regardless of their bank deposits. Properties were declared abandoned and seized. The Igbo were excluded from federal appointments and military promotions. This is the history that lives in the memory of every Biafran. This is the foundation upon which modern injustice rests. When the Nigerian government today accuses Biafran activists of terrorism, it is repeating the same old script: criminalize their existence, delegitimize their humanity, and silence their demand for justice. Simon Ekpa is standing trial in Finland, not because he committed crimes, but because he represents a truth that the Nigerian state cannot tolerate. He represents the unfinished story of Biafra. He represents a people who refuse to die quietly. The prosecution's attempt to use Commander Gentle's alleged arrest as evidence against Simon is a desperate move. First, the lack of verifiable identity makes it unreliable. Second, even if such a person exists, confessions from Nigerian custody are worthless because of torture. Third, The connection to Simon is tenuous at best. Financial support for humanitarian purposes cannot and should not be equated with terrorism. What Karla Gumerus did was to expose the weakness of Nigeria's case in front of the world. He reminded the court that Simon's activism is rooted in human rights, not violence. He reminded the court that the Biafran Liberation Army, as described by prosecutors, is a phantom, an amorphous label, not a structured organization. He reminded the court that international law protects freedom of speech, association, and advocacy. But beyond the courtroom, the significance lies in the inspiration it gave to millions of Biafrans. For decades, the Nigerian state has tried to project an image of Biafran activists as criminals, miscreants, and lawless agitators. Yet in Finland, in the heart of Europe, a respected lawyer stood up to affirm that Simon is not a criminal, but a liberation fighter. This validation from outside Nigeria shook the foundations of Abuja's propaganda. The emotional exchange between Simon and his lawyer highlighted the humanity of the struggle. Simon, tired and broken by incarceration, asked if his lawyer truly believed in him. That question carried the weight of all Biafrans, who often wonder if the world sees their suffering, if the world acknowledges their humanity. Karla's answer was not just for Simon, but for every Biafran. He said he believed. He said he saw Simon as a liberation fighter. He even promised support beyond financial obligations. That was a declaration that this struggle is legitimate, that the Biafran cause has allies beyond Africa, that the Igbo people are not alone. Across Finland, jubilations broke out among the diaspora. In Helsinki, people waved the red, black and green flag with the rising sun. In places like Enugu, Aba and Onitsha, even under the heavy eyes of Nigerian security forces, whispers of joy spread through marketplaces and homes. People said to themselves, Simon will win and we will win too. But it is not only about Simon. It is also about Nnamdi Kanu, who remains detained in Nigeria, enduring the same torture and humiliation. It is about the countless young men disappeared in Obigbo, Orlu and Augu. It is about mothers who wake up to find their sons missing after military raids. It is about fathers whose livelihoods are destroyed because they dared to speak of freedom. The courtroom battle in Finland is connected to all of these realities. The consequences of victory would be historic. If Simon's appeal succeeds, it will expose the lies of the Nigerian government. It will weaken the international narrative that has painted Biafrans as terrorists. It will open space for global discussions on the legitimacy of self-determination for Biafra. It will inspire even more courage in the southeast. It will tell the world that oppression can be challenged, not just in the streets but also in the courts. And what of defeat? Defeat is not an option. Even if the court rules otherwise, the Biafran struggle will not end. It has survived worse. It survived genocide, starvation, marginalization, and decades of silence. No courtroom defeat can kill the dream of freedom. In fact, every act of injustice only deepens the determination. Every prison cell only strengthens the resolve. Every bullet fired only fertilizes the soil of resistance. So where are the solutions? They are in the unity of the Biafran people. They are in the courage to keep speaking even when silenced. They are in the discipline to distinguish between violent opportunists and genuine freedom fighters. They are in the wisdom to use every legal, diplomatic and political channel to advance the cause. And they are in the faith that freedom is not a question of if, but when. To every Biafran facing marginalization, torture and rejection, this message is for you. You are not worthless. You are not powerless. You are heirs to a proud civilization, descendants of a people who resisted slavery, colonialism, and genocide. You carry the fire of resilience in your blood. The Nigerian government may try to crush your dignity, but dignity cannot be killed. It is eternal. Remember the words of history. South Africa endured apartheid for decades, but freedom came. India lived under British colonialism, but freedom came. Palestine still struggles today, but the voice of justice continues to echo, and so will Biafra. Simon Ekpa's joy in Finland is a reminder that even in exile, even in captivity, even in the face of global conspiracies, hope can never be extinguished. The road is long, but every step brings us closer. The chains of oppression may seem heavy, but they are not unbreakable. The lies of the Nigerian state may seem loud, but truth will always outlive propaganda. The story of Biafra is not a story of defeat. It is a story of survival. It is a story of resilience. It is a story of a people who will never forget who they are. And as the court in Finland prepares to hear more evidence, as Simon prepares to stand with courage, as Biafrans across the globe prepare to keep resisting, one truth stands tall: freedom is coming. No oppressor in history has ever defeated the spirit of a determined people. Nigeria will not be the first. And so, as we close this chapter for now, let every Biafran hold their head high. The struggle continues, but the victory is already written. Simon Ekpa is not alone. Nnamdi Kanu is not forgotten. The Biafran people are not abandoned. The rising sun of Biafra will shine again, brighter than ever, and when it does, the world will remember that against all odds, a people who were starved, massacred, and silenced found their voice, reclaimed their dignity, and won their freedom. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new dawn.
Alright guys, so what's your take on this? Let's hear from you. Please drop your comments below the comment section. Share this video, make it go viral. Thank you and bye for now.